Hi, everyone. I'm Tran Bowie. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have you been experiencing a roller coaster of emotions since COVID-19 entered our lives? Well, mental health therapist Tammy von Nordheim is here to help. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us. I was looking at my calendar, so I think we're about in week 6 since the quarantine. And I don't know about everyone, but in the beginning, it just kind of felt like we're taking a break or on vacation. But now I'm seeing that people are starting to talk about their emotions a lot more. So what are people feeling right now?
Well, Tran, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And what I'd like to share is that people are feeling a lot of anxiety. They're feeling a lot of depression. There's even some trauma and some grief involved because people are losing the loved ones and people that they know or that they've worked with. And they're having to deal with that and not only deal with their loss, but deal with the thoughts that they probably had to pass alone without any loved ones around them. The trauma involved with that, because all of this happened to us so unexpectedly that nobody had time to prepare mentally, emotionally, financially for this shut in that we are all having to follow along with right now. And so with all of that comes depression and lots of anxiety. And if we thought we had anxiety before and we think we're having anxiety now, imagine what it's going to be like when we are finally given the freedom to kind of move about as we were before, because there's even more anxiety with suspicious looks like, is that person still sick? Can I really be free? I mean, your anxiety is not going to go away once the government opens the country back up so that we can start moving around.
So, you're a trained professional, so you know what to do and you know how to tell people to deal with their emotions. But how have you been feeling through all this? Because not only are you having to deal with your own emotions, you're also married and you have children, but then you're also talking to people who are coming to you for guidance.
Yes, of course. I'm actually experiencing some of those same feelings myself, but my ability to see a clearer picture and put things into a perspective has been able to afford me the ability to kind of self-help. So whenever I feel those thoughts creeping in on myself, then I replace them with positive self-talk and remind myself that every of the blessings that we have right now, instead of focusing on all of the negative things that we feel that were taken away from us. And the unknown is a beast for everybody, to be honest. And for those who are not prepared mentally and emotionally, it can be extremely taxing on them. So for myself personally, I'm just keeping it all into perspective, understanding that it's not the end of the world. At least we're praying it's not. But to stay focused on the positives, keep prayer in our household, and to practice a lot of self-care.
Well, I want everyone to know that we are actually going to be taking questions throughout this. So please use this as your time to answer, ask any kind of questions that you have as we try to navigate through it. So Tammy, are you seeing that more people are trying to come to you, or are they feeling like they can handle it on their own, or even just ignoring it?
Yes, Tran, I have actually seen an increase in my clientele because of this. Well, whether it's because of this or whether it's because they have more time now that they can see me and it's more convenient with them being able to do telehealth. However, I have also seen a drop because people are losing their jobs. They're having a reduction in hours. They're being furloughed. And so with that being said, the clients that I had as steady clients, some of them have had to drop off because of that. And that really makes me sad, because this is a very crucial time when they really need to have the help and support of their therapist. And as well as those people who hadn't even considered having a therapist, there needs to be space held for them as well.
So are you seeing most of your clients over the phone, or do you like to be face-to-face?
I prefer face-to-face, but in these times, I'm totally fine with phone calls or video telehealth, because that's safer for all of us.
Yeah, so for me, I have to say, now that we're into week 6, 1 minute, I feel like, oh, this is great. I get bonding time, lots of time to do all these things that I want to do. And then the next minute, I feel like I need to get out. So what are people, I think that, like, we have to keep remembering, like you were talking about the blessings, that we are safe. For most of us, we are safe in our homes, and there are people who have more challenging situations, and some people even have, are risking their lives. So I kind of have to put that in perspective. But I also think that we have to look at each person and their concerns, and all these emotions are valid, whether you're at home or you're on the front lines.
Absolutely. We all have to remember that everybody's emotion is valid. Everybody, what they're feeling is very real to them. And we, should be careful that we are not diminishing what somebody else is feeling, because that's not what we're feeling. We have to, be respectful of that, support that, and encourage those people. So that is a real thing that, sometimes we dismiss what somebody else is feeling because we don't feel it ourselves, and therefore we don't think they should be feeling it. But we should be careful about being so judgmental, because it is very real for them. We don't know what happened prior to coronavirus coming into our country. We don't know what was going on in that person's life. So their anxiety level might have already been up to here with a lot of personal issues, and just to add this on top of it could be devastating for them.
And we do have a question coming in from Ashish Chaudhry. He says, thanks for sharing this topic. And he actually interviewed you for a news story over the weekend, which I love that we're now touching on mental health. What are the best ways to help someone battling this, and the signs to look for? Very true, because I feel like in this situation, we're all going through the same thing. So sometimes we miss the signs because we are in this together.
Well, thank you for that question, Ashish. For me, I believe that the best way for us to help someone who's going through this is to have an open mind and an open heart, and be there to listen to them. Sometimes people just need to talk about it. Sometimes they just need to have someone to bounce things off of, and offer them some encouragement. Encourage them to practice self-care, and encourage them to define a section of the day for themselves to have some me time. It's really important for people to feel heard and to not feel like they're alone, because right now we are already in a form of isolation. And so if we're already isolated, especially think about those people who live alone. If we're already isolated physically, we don't want to also feel isolated emotionally and mentally. So if you have friends or family out there who are living alone, or pretty much alone, like maybe they have a roommate, so they're still not really together, reach out to them and occasionally and ask them, just say, how are you doing? Are you feeling a little down? And be specific, do you feel lonely? Because sometimes it's difficult for them to voice that. And what I also suggest to a lot of people is have some FaceTime with someone that you care about. Try to have some FaceTime with someone who makes you laugh, or have some FaceTime with someone who is inspiring and motivating. And even more importantly, you can be the person to offer that to somebody else. If you know that you are inspiring and motivating and nurturing, think about calling someone else who might not think to reach out to you, and just say, hey, because it's going to lift their spirits. And that can mean the world to them.
You're right. I do like that you mentioned FaceTime, because I think we're all kind of right now hiding behind our phones and our computers and laptops and stuff. And so we're sending each other messages. But in those messages, sometimes it's hard to tell how someone is actually feeling. So I do like that you mentioned the FaceTime. So when talking, and you kind of touched on it with the signs, but when does it become something more serious? Yes, I feel depressed at times, or sad at times, or anxious at times. When does it become serious enough that now we need to go see someone, or we might need to do more counseling in some way?
Well, first of all, I'd like to encourage people to not wait until it becomes more serious. That's when it's a little bit more challenging to tackle, right? And you also don't want to wait until the drove of people start realizing I need mental health, and then you try to get an appointment with someone and they're no longer taking clients because they are fully booked. So the first thing I would say is don't wait until it becomes more serious. If you start to feel like that you have a lot of anxiety buildup, and you're constantly focused on it and thinking about it day after day, that's the first sign that maybe you should talk to somebody. If you go to the grocery store, because that's someplace we all have to go at least once every 2 or 3 weeks, and you wear gloves, you wear your mask, you got your hair covered, you're all covered up. And then you go home and you change your clothes in the garage and you wipe down all of your groceries, and then you take it into the house. If you find yourself constantly worried that, I have a tickle in my throat, or do I have, a headache, or do I have a fever for like the next 3 to 4 days just because you left the house, that is a huge indicator that the grip of anxiety is starting to really kind of close in on you, and you should probably reach out and call someone to make an appointment. If you're having any suicidal ideation because you feel like, how can I continue to live like this? I've lost everything in stocks, or I don't have a job, or I can't pay my employees, or feeling responsible for everybody else. If you feel as if you don't know how you're gonna have all these bill collectors on top of you afterwards, so you're dreading that. If you're starting to feel closed in and you're thinking maybe I need to just go ahead and just not have to deal with this, that's a huge sign that you really need to reach out and talk to someone. If you find yourself unable to get out of bed, if you find yourself choosing to not shower and practice good hygiene, like brushing your teeth, taking a bath, changing your clothes at least, several times a week. If you find yourself crying for no reason at all, or almost crying for no reason at all, those are signs that depression is starting to come over you. That's when you should definitely, reach out to a therapist and try to get an appointment with someone. There's so many other signs that I can share with you, but I know we have limited time. But those are a few of the top ones that come to mind. And I just really want to encourage people, first of all, to not wait until it seems like it's out of control. Go ahead and talk to someone. And because you reach out to a mental health therapist and schedule an appointment, it does not mean, first of all, that you have to go in, or in this case, do telehealth every single week. It doesn't mean you have to do it bi-weekly. If you just talk to them, and maybe talk to them once every couple of weeks or once a month, but you have somebody that you trust, that you're building a rapport with, that you can reach out to in times that you feel extremely stressed, that in itself can be very relieving. So I would say go ahead and find that therapist and lock them into your phone, and do a consultation with them, and maybe your first appointment, and then go from there.
And those signs that you were talking about, are those also for people who may have not have had signs of depression before, or is that something ongoing? Is that someone who already has experienced that before, or is that could happen to anybody?
It could happen to anybody, and no, it does not have to have been in your history prior to. And interestingly enough, a lot of people had those signs, especially, for the anxiety and the depression, but maybe over something else before the coronavirus even came. But they didn't realize that that's something that they could get help for. They just push on through and just think, maybe I'm just having a bad day, or maybe I just had a bad week. I'm just gonna, wake up tomorrow and it's another day, and push on through, go do my job, take care of my family. And then if you really had them slow things down, take a look at their pattern over the last few months, and then have them really think about how often they were having any of those feelings or those thoughts, they'll realize, wow, it was more prevalent in my life than I realized. And even before this virus came up, they probably should have been seeing a therapist. But, there's a stigma about seeing a mental health therapist, right? A lot of people feel as if seeing a mental health therapist means that you are crazy, that you have some major heavy issues, that you can't hold a job, or you can't be dependent on for anything, that you're irresponsible, that you're insane. Seeing a mental health therapist does not mean that. Some people also think that, if I go see a mental health therapist, it's going to follow me for the rest of my life. Is it going to prevent me from being able to get the job of my dreams? Is it going to prevent me from living a full, happy life? No, quite the opposite. first of all, it does not necessarily follow you for the rest of your life, unless you're, usually when you're going through insurance, it has to be documented. But if you're self-pay, it is not following you, because those files are confidential and they're private, so nobody has access to them that you don't want to have access to them. And secondly, the people that choose to see a mental health therapist are some of the bravest, most powerful people in this world, because they've seen that, and recognized and admitted that I have some concerns and I want to be better. So to me, those are the strong people, not those people who constantly say, I got this, I can do it on my own.
Yeah, and I think there is a stigma around it, but I feel like also things have changed, and that's part of self-care now. And yes, to allow it to just fester and prolong. Let's talk to Lynn McDonald. She says, what are some ways we can self-check to know if you're depressed or need to reach out? Sometimes it is hard to recognize in a bubble. Absolutely.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you for your question. You actually just missed, we actually answered that, but I'm going to repeat it. If you have signs of anxiety, like you just go out of the house to go to the grocery store and you come back in taking every precaution in the world, but for the next, 3 to 5 days, you're constantly concerned on whether or not you picked up something, like it's consuming your life all day. And then also, if you're depressed, if you're finding that you're not changing your clothes, but like once a week, if that, you're not taking a shower, you're not brushing your teeth regularly like you had been because you had to get up and do your morning routine and go to work or go to school. Those are signs that you're depressed, because you no longer care. You're not even noticing that you have a smell, or, if you're not eating enough, and that's a sign. If you're overeating, that's a sign. If you're just simply, binging on junk food, that's also a sign. Even though, we all have some level of doing that, it just depends on how long you allow that to continue. If you're having thoughts of harming yourself or someone else, that's a sign.
Yeah, so I think it almost sounds like when it's beyond the norm, not just a little, because I think in the beginning it was funny, we're talking about, oh, we're just going to wear our PJs and pig out all day. But yes, it seems like when it becomes a pattern, and you're right, when you don't notice it. I want to go on to talking about children. So my kids have been out of school. I think, we're starting week 6 right now. So there are a lot of kids at home. I want to talk about these kids who may be experiencing some anxiety or even depression. Like some kids, they're just kind of doing their own thing. They're off their routine, but then there are kids who might be missing their friends and their teachers. And parents are so busy, trying to help them with their work and do their own work and just take care of the house, that what do we need to do? What do we need to make sure that we're doing with the kids to make sure that they're okay? And then also recognizing, and it could be the signs if there is a problem.
Well, I think the most important thing that we should do as parents in helping our kids to make it through this time is trying to keep structure in their lives, trying to stay as close as possible to the routines and the structure that they were used to before they had to stop going to school. So that means, of course, the school days are shorter than they were when they were going to school, but get them up at the same time every morning, even if they get to sleep in a little bit. Make sure they do their morning routine, if they have one, making their beds, brushing their teeth, getting dressed, and then tell them at a certain time they are to start their schoolwork. For example, in my family, my kids are up and they've had breakfast, they've done their morning routine, and they are scheduled to start schoolwork at 10 a.m. We used to say 11 a.m. and realized we needed to bring it back because 11 was stretching until 4 or 5. So they are starting their schoolwork at 10 a.m. Then they are to shoot to be done with their schoolwork by, say, 12:30, 1 o'clock, because if you don't give them an end time, then it also stretches out and it starts to get everybody off schedule, right? So at that time, then it's lunchtime, and then it's free time. And if they have any extra schoolwork they have to do, then there's an hour at the end of the day that's scheduled. So making sure that they get outside for some fresh air, that there's some form of exercise incorporated into their routine, because in school they had PE, right? So if you have any exercise equipment, treadmill, stationary bike, especially on, rainy days or something, they are to get on that for 15, 20 minutes. incorporating family time where we all play a board game or some cards or watch a movie together. Encouraging the kids to learn how to cook if they don't know how to cook, so doing something in the kitchen with them. All of this shows the kids that life, it can still be as normal as possible, and it doesn't disrupt them as much. So we as adults, in our heads, we're concerned with like, okay, so what's happening now? What's on the news? What is the government doing? When will this be over? The kids should not have to worry about that. So if you keep them on a schedule, that's going to be very helpful for them. And also be available if they have questions about what's going on with COVID-19. Be honest, but you don't have to give them too many deep details, because sometimes kids will privately hold that in and not tell you, but that starts creating anxiety for them, and they'll go to bed at night concerned about it, concerned that, oh my gosh, my parent or my grandparent is considered high risk. What if something happens to them? And then that creates them not wanting to go out in public when we are free to go out in public, because they have not been able to process that appropriately. So be open to having conversations with your kids, being honest, but not giving way more information than you really need to give them at the time.
Are you seeing that children who struggled in the past are having more trouble now during the quarantine, or less because they are around their parents more?
Well, I don't see a lot of kids in my office, or as my clientele. But from what I can tell with like my friends who have kids that are close to my kids' age, my kids are like in the early teens. From what I can tell in conversations with other friend parents, the kids are actually doing okay. I don't think that they're struggling that much, and I don't know if it's because it's my circle of friends, and how they manage their households. But it seems like the kids are doing okay. I do imagine, though, because you see it on the news and you hear it from friends of friends, there are some kids who are struggling, if they are in households where they were not getting enough to eat, or where the parent has, no transportation, has lost their job, and they're trying to make it the best way they can. So the parent is deeply depressed. The kids are going to feel that. And so no matter what you do, if there's not some form of support coming into that house, it's really pulling at the kids too. So my heart is really going out to those families, and it's really difficult to identify them, right? Because you don't necessarily see them out and about, because everybody's supposed to be sheltering in. And those are not the kids you see when you do go out and go for walks or bike rides, because one, they may not have a bike, or two, they might live in neighborhoods where it's not necessarily safe to just go out and walk. So I'm sure that there are some kids who are at risk of being kind of lost in the cracks about this. But from my circle of friends so far, I think kids are managing pretty well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I do worry about the children whose families are already struggling, because they do get lost. So I would like to wrap this up by just asking you the takeaway from this. I love what you said about, with the kids, like putting them on a routine, because I feel like I need to be put on a routine. For the last few weeks, it's, I was so used to waking up at a certain time, and I had this schedule. And so now it's just all over the place. So what is a takeaway right now for those of you out there who just kind of need that push? You may be feeling some despair and sadness, or just anxiety. What would you tell people?
What I would tell people is to get involved. Don't find yourself sitting at home uninspired, unmotivated, unempowered, just because you can't go out of the house. Technology today has expanded so much. We have access to so many things. Can you imagine going through this right now when we only had the dial phones, the push button phones? We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have computers and Wi-Fi. We have so many blessings right now. Take advantage of them. Let me just say this, when it comes to the children, not only keep them on a schedule, but look for outside activities that they can find online. Like, I know there's dance arts education. I have a friend who runs that. And then there's, like, if they were a part of a dance group or some sort of a cheering group or something. Sometimes they have these Zoom calls where they can still continue classes. Get them involved with that. But even more, us as adults personally, we can also find classes like that. Everybody's giving away or selling something at an affordable price for on like Zoom, where you can tap in and become social with people sometimes you haven't even met before. Don't allow yourself to kind of become withdrawn. Like, push yourself to step outside of your comfort zone and find something to do that is encouraging and makes you happy. Try a new hobby, you know, knitting. I don't know.
Right. No, I should take out my crochet needles. Well, thank you so much. This was so enlightening. And you know, the takeaway from me is that it's okay to feel the sadness and to have anxiety, but if you do feel like you can't deal with this on your own, that it is better to go see a professional, someone who's trained to walk you through this. And above all else is just to reach out to your tribe, your crew, your friends, your family, people who are there to walk you through this, because I bet you everyone's going through the same thing. So thank you so much again for all your advice. And thank you everyone who joined us this afternoon. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Thank you.